this lady came up to me and she had like tears in her eyes and she said, I just want to thank you. And she told me that she came to this event as her last resort because she had lost her son a couple of years ago. And she had seen, several psychics or mediums, and none of them were able to make a connection for her to her son. And she was told by a couple of these mediums or psychics, whoever she went to, it was because that he didn't want to talk to her, which is just atrocious. I mean, there's no words for that.
Right. Yeah.
Um, Obviously, either they were fraudulent or even if they couldn't make a connection, you would never say that. It has something to do with their energy. It's just not a good match, whatever. But this poor woman was broken, thinking, gosh, my son is dead. He doesn't want to communicate with me. I mean, how horrible. So she just said that I just changed her life. And sometimes, everybody that comes to a medium is coming because they experience in grief. But sometimes these people are they're hanging on by a thread. So you have to take this, profession very seriously, and know.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kirby Valladares, and welcome to Spirit Said So. Together, we'll explore powerful stories of near death experiences and spiritual gifts, conversations that may forever change the way you see life. Today's guest is Connie Fusella. Connie is a certified psychic medium with a gift for bridging the gap between the physical and spiritual realms. Her fascinating journey began with conscious memories of spirit communication at age 4, followed by 3 spiritually transformative near death experiences, intensifying her connection to the afterlife. Connie is certified by the Helping Parents Heal and Forever Family Foundation organizations and is a guest radio personality of Signs of Life Radio. She is the award winning author of You Are Soul Beautiful, a unique perspective into the soul's quest for its destiny. You Are Soul Beautiful documents Connie's spiritual journey, NDEs, and introduces the concept of the 5 Soulitudes, which are various soul progression levels based on your awareness and acceptance of your soul's true purpose. Connie is also a guest speaker for IANS, which stands for International Association for Near-Death Studies. Connie offers private, group readings, public speaking events, and mediumship development workshops. Her unique gift and experiences help others navigate the complexities of the spiritual realm by offering proof through highly evidential readings that there is an afterlife and that the bonds of love are eternal and can never be broken. Folks, please welcome Connie Fusella. Hi, Connie. How are you doing today?
Hi, Kirby. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on your podcast. I really appreciate it.
How did you tap into your mediumship? How did that all get started?
Yeah, so I started having awareness to spirit at the young age of 4. And for me, it was quite unexpected, as you can imagine, a young child. And I would, every Saturday morning was laundry day in my household. And I would follow my mom down the stairs. I lived in upstate New York, so the laundry was in the basement. And I would follow her down to do the laundry. It was very routine. But one Saturday, as I was following her back up the stairs, I felt like this sensation. The hairs on my neck started to stand up, and I just had this feeling like there was something or someone behind me. And when I turned around in the far corner of the room, I saw an old man standing there. So of course, this frightened me and I scurried up the steps past my mom and ran, into my bed, pulled the covers over my head and just stood there shaking and crying. I didn't know what was going on. Um, there's a whole story behind that, which I write in the book that you mentioned, You Are So Beautiful. But my father had made up a story that where I saw the old man, which is in front of a door on the far side of the room, that behind that door, my father had told me that there was a monster back there. Because that's where the furnace room was. The furnace was back there, and he always told me never go there, never open that door. Of course, he didn't want me to get hurt, so he invented up this story of this monster make me afraid of that area, and it worked. But so now, of course, my little brain is going 100 miles an hour, thinking, "My God, I've seen the monster." So this was all very overwhelming. I didn't know what to do with it. Tried to rationalize. I saw a shadow. Make a long story short, the next Saturday came along and I saw the old man again. And I continued to see him. And then I wasn't really afraid. It sort of became a little game for me, to kind of walk down the steps and, see if he was there. If he was there, I'd be like, okay. But, I didn't know what to do with that. So I never mentioned it to my mom or my dad. And on the last time that I saw him, as I went back up the steps, I turned around and I was looking at him and my mom noticing, that I wasn't coming after her said, "Come on, Connie." She turned around and said, "What are you looking at?" And I point to the old man and she says, "Well, there's nobody there. Come on, come on." So now, this gets me thinking like, well, this must be some big secret, right? Because I'm looking at this man. My mother says there's nobody there. So I just thought I was going to be a big girl and not say anything and keep the family secret. So I never said anything about seeing this old man. And that was the last time that I saw him. But shortly after that, I started hearing spirit. And that came in the form, like most children do, I had a special little toy. This was a little lion cub that I got on when I was 4 years old for Christmas. And her name was Leah, and I took her everywhere. She's my best friend. And all of a sudden, Leah, as amazing as she was to me, all of a sudden she could talk, or so I thought. And, that might sound a little crazy to some people, but, I'm 4 years old and I'm hearing something, and I have this animal with me all the time, the stuffed animal. And I just thought that that was my stuffed animal talking to me. And it was little things that I started hearing, like, dad's home, and then my father would pull in the driveway, or the phone would ring, and I always knew who was on the other end, Aunt Julia, grandma, neighbor, like it just like, little things. But my favorite thing was when I would play childhood games, especially ones that were like match games where you had to turn over the cards. Because as I put my hand, over the cards to see which one I was going to pick, I would be guided. I'd hear that one, and of course I'd pick up the matching card, and I was always winning, which was great for me. Um, so, I started seeing, then I started hearing, and then when I started school, I went to Catholic school, actually from nursery school to eighth grade. When I started, I stopped hearing and seeing. But I always had the knowing. I just knew things. Things came very naturally for me. So I sort of sailed through high school, pretty much a straight A student. I didn't really have to apply myself or study. I never brought, home a book and put my nose into it. Just things came naturally for me. And that's really how it started.
Really cool that you remember all of that, even at, from the age 4 on. When was it that you kind of like talked about it?
Yeah, boy, did it take a while. I don't think I started talking about it until I was probably in my 30s, actually. Because what happened is, life happened and I forgot who I was. And that's why the universe, my soul, my team on the other side had to wake me up. And that's why I had those three near-death experiences to really wake me up to who I was, to be that bridge, between the physical and spiritual realms. I didn't come from a background family that talked about, the supernatural, psychics, mediums, the afterlife. Nobody talked about anything like that. So I didn't have any frame of reference about this type of stuff. So, I kind of went through life, and then in my early 20s, That's when my first near-death experience happened, and it was an allergic or an adverse reaction to medication, which went into anaphylaxis. And I ended up, in the hospital. And the next thing, and it's interesting because the next thing I remember is I was in this space. I call it a room, but there was no doors, windows, floor, ceiling, anything. It was just a big white space. And I was sitting like with my legs crossed in front of me, on the floor, but there's no floor in the space, I guess, floating. Then so bright, light everywhere, and I hear this like white noise vibration, like a humming kind of sound going on. And then the next thing you know, this being walks toward me, a very tall being. It was a non-human entity of some sort. And it just glowing. I mean, the light was so intense, I couldn't make out any features. I just saw the shape. And they walked towards me and put this big book in my lap. It expanded like my whole lap. And when I looked down, the pages just started flipping, and I could see from the day I was born until the present day in my early 20s. And I saw all these images of people in my life and the feelings and the emotions. And then, I came to. And after I got discharged, I went home and I told my mom, I said, Lisa, I had this really cool dream. And I started to describe, what I saw. And I was describing with detail and accuracy places that I had gone and visited, like when I was 6 months old, under a year, under 2 years. And I had all these vivid, describing pictures that were hung on the wall, like decorations on a table. There was a scene at Christmas, like the ornaments, what they look like really specific things, which my mom verified. And so I had what was called a life review. But of course, at the time, I had no idea. This was like, mid 80s, 1980s at the time. And so I just thought I had a cool dream, and I chalked it up to that.
That's really interesting to have that, and then your mom validating everything, all the details.
Yeah.
Interesting that you were able to see things that, when you were 6 months old, and she was able to remember that, because sometimes parents are like, oh, I don't remember.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. And the thing that started happening why I say my near-death experiences were so spiritually transformational and waking up, my natural born gifts is soon after that NDE, I started experiencing sleep paralysis, pretty frequently. And for those that don't know what that is, it's when you're caught between the dream and waking state and you're kind of frozen there. You can't move, you can't talk, and it can be scary. But for me, this was happening often, and it was always in the same format. In that I would be laying in the bed, this would come over me, and then all of a sudden, I would hear that white noise vibration sound again, like feel it. And then I would see myself in spirit form come out of my physical body and straddle my body and try to pull myself up. And all the while, I hear a voice saying, you need to raise yourself up. You need to raise yourself up, repeating and repeating. You need to raise yourself up. So then I'd come out of this, sleep paralysis, and, I'd remember it, but I'd think to myself, well, yeah, of course, I need to raise myself up. Like, I didn't know if that was myself saying that to me, like, and you need to try to move from the situation. I never understood it for years and years and years until I became a medium. And I realized at that point in my life, my helpers on the other side, my soul, they were actually giving me the keys to the afterlife, because to be a medium, you need to raise yourself up. You need to raise your vibration up in order to connect to the other side. So it was like they were nudging me, like, this is you, Connie. You need to raise yourself up again, your vibration, so we can talk to you. And I just didn't understand it.
Yeah. So can I ask you about the sleep paralysis? So when
Sure.
you were in your sleep paralysis, you said you were able to almost like get out of your body, and you were trying to get your
Yes.
physical body up.
Yes.
And they were just telling you you just need to raise yourself up.
Yeah, I just kept hearing that voice repeating over and over again.
Okay. And that just was, you attributed that to raising your vibration, right? Just
Yes.
attuning,
Yes.
more to the messages that you're getting. Okay, so you had your near death experience, you had just sleep paralysis. What's going on next? Like what
Yeah.
how did you
So,
get to the next part?
the,
Yeah.
the message went unanswered. And so, yeah, near death number two happened. This time it was a little bit more medically intensive, another adverse reaction to medication. And this time I ended up in the hospital in the emergency room. And I remember, being wheeled in. I remember, the emergency personnel gathering around me. And then the next thing you know, I'm floating on the ceiling watching the doctor and the personnel work on me. And the next thing I see is the doctor grab the defibrillator paddles and come at me. I'm on the stretcher and I see my body like, jumping off the stretcher like a rag doll. And then all of a sudden, I'm in this tunnel. And I would describe the tunnel about the size of a closed MRI. If anybody's ever had an MRI, that's how it felt to me. Very, bright white light. And it felt, I like to describe it as a Disney World simulation ride. So kind of on my back, feet first, going through this tunnel. And again, that white noise, that humming vibration sound going on, getting stronger and stronger as I'm getting toward the brightest light at the end of the tunnel. But I don't feel anything but peace and love. And that's the same thing in my first near death experience. I wasn't scared. I was just very peaceful. I felt loved. I was safe. And for this experience, though, I was getting excited as I was going through the tunnel. It was like I felt like I'm going home. I couldn't wait to get to the end of the tunnel. And then, just as I get to the end, my feet touch into what I call the glow because it was like the brightest part right at the tunnel entry there. And they sunk in into this matter like it was jello, just sunk right into it. And then at that moment, it was like this weird, like I got pulled back. It was like, like I zipped back and I opened my eyes. And so obviously, what happened is later on, the doctor, told me I had gone into ventricular tachycardia arrest. And I flatlined, and they were able to bring me back. It was a pretty interesting experience. And then again, I spent a few days in the hospital running tests because they couldn't figure out why a young, healthy, woman would all of a sudden have a VTAC. And I didn't find out till, probably 10, 15 years later. I was taking an allergy medicine that the FDA since pulled off the market because it was causing fast heart rhythms. So that's what happened to me.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. But so again, I go home and describe, to my family this cool dream that I had, not realizing again, I had a near-death experience. But what started happening after this one is I was commuting at the time to New York City, and it was a 2-hour one-way commute. It was pretty miserable. I did that for a while.
Wow.
Yeah,
That is
I spent my
intense.
yeah, I spent my life on a train. But when I would sit next to people or even just walking, to my office, when I came close to people, I started hearing names. And every once in a while, I'd see a little vision of something. So I'm like, what is going on? And so this was happening more frequently, and I needed to figure out what was happening to me without coming across like a real lunatic, right? So if I sat next to somebody and I'd hear Frank, I would just kind of, gently say to the person, if it was a male, I'd say, "Oh, you look familiar. Is your name Frank?" And because I didn't know, and of course they would say no, but my father's name was Frank. He's passed. And I was like, oh, okay, sorry. I thought you looked, but it's just, weird. I was hearing the names of people that were passed associated with the people that I was sitting next to. So this was happening, and then the strangest thing happened. In New York, everything is I worked in New York City, very fast paced, and I had a 45-minute lunch hour. So I would always eat out of one of maybe three places within like a 2 to 3 block, area. So I can go grab lunch, bring it to my office, or sit outside if it was nice and eat it quickly. Well, one day, and this was like, maybe a few weeks after, maybe a few months after, I can't remember, I came back from the second NDE. Um, I just started looking in a different direction. And I come across a psychic shop. It's like a building, is psychic letters. I was like, oh, and I go inside. I'm curious. I'm like, well, what is this place? Like, what goes on here? And the man at the front desk just says, oh, well, we have people here that will tell your future, your fortune. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I want to do that. So I sign up for like a 10-minute reading and I get it. And I'm fascinated because something in me is being pulled to this metaphysical, work. And I know on a soul level, this is part of me somehow, right? Of course, at the time I didn't know, but my soul was pulling me, right, toward this. And so I would go for readings, a couple times a month. And finally, in 1991, I bought my first deck of tarot cards from this establishment because I was thinking to myself, well, something weird is going on. I don't know what. And of course, I had nobody to talk to about this. So we didn't have like the internet or anything right back then. So I'm just kind of lost. But I'm like, something strange is going on with me. So, I said, maybe, if I buy a deck of cards, because I'm watching the people do this and I'm like, okay, they all have a meaning. They're putting them down and they're saying the meaning. I'm like, well, how hard can that be? Right. This is how I'm thinking. So I'm like, okay, something's going on with me. Maybe if I do the cards, something will, I don't know, manifest somehow. So I get the deck of cards, I go home, I read the little pamphlet that comes with it, nothing resonates. Now, this is very frustrating for me because I went all through school, high school. I mean, I could read books like this in half an hour and ace a test, but I can't remember this little piece of paper with these words and meanings. Like nothing was sticking. So I read it 2 or 3 times and nothing. So I took the pack of cards and I put them in this like little, I don't know, box of stuff that I kept in my closet of, miscellaneous stuff. I didn't have the heart to throw them out. So there they went. Um, and there they stayed for over 10 years. And during those 10 years, is what I write about in my book. I had to go through different levels of soul evolution to find myself, to find my true purpose. And that meant getting rid of people, getting rid of situations. And because during those 10 years or so, I wasn't really receiving any information like I had been because other people's negative energy and circumstances were just closing me down and I was not in a good place. So, I had to make some changes, and that's what I call the Soulitudes, the 5 different levels. And so in the book, I use my story to show how I had to move through these different levels to get back to where I needed to be. So after 10 years or so is when my third near-death experience happened.
I remember I had tarot cards and I kind of gravitated to them when I first got them. And that was like over 20 years ago, but I just kind of messed around with it. And like you, I couldn't remember any of it. I would always have to refer to the little pamphlet because I do
Right,
remember I was like a little pamphlet. You weren't getting anything. You were in an environment that was just
right,
not conducive for you to
right,
kind of like raise higher. So now you have a third NDE. So tell us a little bit more
right.
about that.
Yeah. So this one was an after effect from surgery and still kind of feeling the effects of anesthesia and medication. And next thing you know, I'm in like rolling clouds. It's beautiful and the clouds part, and I find myself in this beautiful meadow. Everything is green and lush and flowers and beautiful and colorful, and the sun is shining. It's just gorgeous. And these little children, about kindergarten age, come running towards me and they grab my hand on each side of me and they form a little circle. And we start singing and dancing, kind of like, a ring around the rosy type of situation. but we're singing a song that I didn't learn on the earth plane. It's in a language I couldn't tell you what it was, but I knew it. And I sang it, and I was just so happy and so full of joy. And the kids bright, and their cheeks are glowing, and they're just, every healthy, and I was just so happy. And then all of a sudden, the children stop dancing and they kind of part on either side of me and they look, forward. And as I look, I see a man walking towards us. Now, I had mentioned I, was brought up Catholic. I went to Catholic school. So this man, but for all intents and purposes, to me, I recognize him as Jesus. And he comes to me and he says, "Do you like it here?" And I said, "Well, I love it here." But I look around because at some level, I realized out of all the changes I had made in my life, at this point in my life, I am now a single mom of two small boys. And I look around and I said, "But where are my children?" And he said, "Well, it's not their time yet." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So then the little children there grab my hands again and we start singing and dancing again for a little bit. And then they stop again. And then Jesus looks at me again. And the thing that was so memorable the most, is so incredible about this experience, was the way that Jesus looked at me. Because his eyes were changing colors like the ocean. They were green, blue, turquoise, gold. They just kept like changing. And when he looked at me, it wasn't like he was just staring at me or looking through me or judging me. I felt nothing but love and peace and safety. But I knew when he looked at me, like he knew all of me, not just in this lifetime, but in all of my lifetimes, in all of my soul evolutions. He knew everything that I was made of. He knew my soul. And he asked me again, "Do you like it here?" And I said, "I love it here." And again, "But where are my children?" And he said, "Well, it's not their time yet. And it's not your time either. You have yet to become who you were meant to be." And with that, I wake up and again thinking, wow, another cool dream, right? And thinking to myself, well, what the heck does that mean? Who am I supposed to be? I'm Connie. Like, what does that mean? And so the answer came a few weeks later. And out of the blue, I got a phone call from a lady who was organizing a psychic fair in South Florida. And this was like a Thursday, and the fair was Saturday. She was short staffed. She had some cancellations, and she wanted to know if I would be a tarot card reader. So I said, "Okay, hold on a second." And I go running into my closet. Now, mind you, 10, 11, almost 11 years later, I still have this box of junk, right? And I go and digging through there, and there is that pack of tarot cards, right? That I bought in 1991. So I go back to the phone. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, okay, great." I get the details. I hang up. You know, Saturday morning rolls along, and it was like, whew, I was like, "Oh my God, what am I doing? Like, how did I even commit to this? Like, what was I thinking?" So I start really freaking out because I was like, I don't know what, I've never done a reading. I don't know what the cards mean. Like, I'm still like trying to get my head around, like, how did I just instantaneously accept and like what happened, right? So I started to get myself worked up and get sick. I was getting nauseous, I'm sweating. But I was like, okay, I know this lady was short-staffed, and I didn't have the heart to, call and cancel. That's just not who I am. So my plan is I'm going to show up at this place. I'm going to tell the lady, "I'm sorry, I can't read because one, I don't know how. I'll just volunteer. I'll serve coffee. I'll greet people. I'll do something, right? That's my plan." So I get there, the place is crowded. She's really stressed out. Her face is red. She grabs me. She like hurries me down this like long, it's a one big room with all these like booths, little rooms. And she brings me all the way to the end. There's a table and two chairs. She's like, "This is your place. This is where you're going to be, blah, 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 blah." And I said, "Oh," I said, "I'm sorry. I'm going to have to tell you something." She looked at me and I said, I'm not going to be able to read for you today because she just like put the hand up. And she's, oh no. She said, I need you to read. So I was terrified of her. And I was just like, oh my goodness. I was like, okay, okay. Like I didn't want, I was like, "Mm." So she left and I sat there and I'm just like going out of my mind, like, what am I going to do? So I just sat there praying, like, oh God, don't send anybody here. I'm way at the end. Maybe nobody will reach me, right?
Yeah, right.
So like 10, 15 minutes later, a lady shows up. She's in her mid 50s, I'd say, early to mid 50s. She comes in, she sits down. And so I'm trying to make small talk. I really don't even know what to do. And so I start to get the cards out. And you ever take a new deck of cards out? It's like painful, right?
Yes.
So I'm maneuvering them out of the thing, and she's looking at me, giving me the look like the side eye, like, I don't know about this one. I can tell, right? So I'm like, oh my God. So I get the cards out, and I said, oh, have you ever had a reading before? Hoping she's going to say no, right? Maybe I can pull something off here. And she says, oh, yes, I get them all the time, for several years. So now this just deflates me, right? And just fuels my anxiety even more because now she knows, what's going on. So I get the cards out and I just start putting them down in a circle. And I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm going. I see the empty space in the middle, like put a few piles in the middle. And I keep going and I use all 76 cards without saying a word, right?
That's
So all
funny.
the
That's
cards,
really
yeah,
funny.
yeah. So all the cards are done. And she's looking at me and she says, are you ever going to say anything? And so I was like, oh my God, oh my God. So I looked down at the cards, and that's when the strangest thing happened. It was like an electric shock came into the top of my head and just sort of like reverberated through my body. And I looked at the cards and I had these messy piles, right? All over the place, no rhyme or reason. And I just started going through the piles and I said to her, there's something about a family secret. Something got revealed and it has to do with somebody passing. And then there's communication from like a lawyer, there's legal paperwork. And then I see a trip overseas, like coming up soon in the next 2 weeks or so. And then like all this money comes to you. I see a big windfall of money coming to you. So then I just stopped and I'm like, does any of this make any sense to you? And she just looked at me and she said, well, a couple of weeks ago, I just found out that I was adopted because my biological father passed away. He lives in Europe, and his attorney contacted me to let me know that I'm the sole beneficiary to his estate, and I'm leaving in a couple of weeks to go collect my inheritance and sign the paperwork. So I was spot on. And I was just like, oh my goodness. So she says, what else, do you see? So I kind of went through the piles and told her other stuff, which she verified. And then she left and she said, wow, that was like the best reading that I've ever had. And she left and I ran to the bathroom and threw up. I started
Wow.
reading. That was my experience. Yeah.
The best reading ever. That is quite the compliment, and it's really cool that you might have created your own your own spread with using all the cards that were in your deck.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's how I read the same exact way today with that same exact I have the same that deck of cards that I bought in 1991, that original deck. It's very worn. It's almost like paper thin, but that's what I use. And I to this day I couldn't tell you the meanings of the cards. I read that way in that same spread.
Wow. That's really cool that you were able to just pick up on that, and then also how that
Yeah.
happened in real time as you're reading for someone, which I can only
Yeah.
imagine is just nerve-wracking. And I think I could say that I get why when I first started reading cards, I remember I was just thinking, I was like, this person paid for a reading, so I'm like,
Exactly.
the anxiety does go up, knowing full
Right.
well they're gonna be like expecting something, especially if they've done other readings before. Okay,
Yes.
so you got the three NDEs, and now you've gotten this download, right?
Right.
Would you consider it a download, or do you think it was just more of
I think it was just more an awakening. Yeah. And
okay,
it's like a download. And then, as I started, playing around with those cards, I'd read for friends. I started doing, some events, trying to get, my style down. what happened is, I'd say maybe, after a while, I started to hear again. It started to open things up, and I was hearing the names again in specific for some reason. And it's the way I do my mediumship today. I get a lot of names, and that's how they started with me, and that's how it is with me. But I started, hearing things again, and then when I would say things, people would say, "Oh yeah, well that person's passed." So I said to a friend, there was like a spiritual center for like psychic stuff and psychic fairs, and I met a friend there. She says, I think you're a medium. And at this point, I don't even know what a medium is. I'm like, well, what do you mean? And so she said, come with me. There was somebody coming, doing a show, and I watched and I was like, yeah, I think maybe that's me. And fast forward, I took a few classes here and there, to see like, well, what does this look like, and how are people doing this, and it really didn't take long for me. And at first, I got some bad instruction, and I almost walked away. And then one day, there was a guest medium coming down in Sarasota, and she was from New Jersey, and I read about her. She was a former Catholic nun. This intrigued me, and I said, you know what? I feel a pull to this. I'm going to go watch this lady. And when I watched the demonstration, I was amazed because she was so authentic and so evidential. And when I sat there, I said, oh my gosh, I have been getting such bad instruction, and this is what I'm looking for. If I'm going to do this, I want to do it like this lady, authentic and real, and, making people, cry and laugh and, all those emotions because she's bringing, those facts out. And that was Janet Nohavec, who founded the Journey Within. And so that weekend, I started taking classes with her. And then soon I was in her advanced mediumship class, and unfortunately we lost her a couple of years ago. But I find it kind of interesting that I now teach at the Journey Within. So I hope that Janet sees me. Well, I know she sees me and knows how grateful I am because she really changed my mind. I was about to walk away from doing this because I wasn't getting the right kind of instruction, and it was all kind of frou-frou and no evidence. And I was like, no, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it the right way. I don't want all this vague stuff. And so, yeah, that's what happened. And here I
Yeah.
am.
Wow. Oh, that's really cool. That you were able to finally get something to resonate. I had no idea you were looking to walk away at some point.
Yes.
I was going to ask. So, two-part question. You did go to Catholic school and you were spiritual. Did you have doubts about your abilities because it did not, based on things that you were taught?
Yeah.
Did that have a conflict? And then also, were the NDEs, do you see them as like, these were kind of like your little checkpoints, like if your life is not going in a direction it should be going as your soul journey, right? Then you have an NDE to kind of direct you back in. Would you say that that was probably why you had three NDEs? Because
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. So, you hear different stories. People see loved ones on the other side. Their eyes get open. They change their lives. Maybe they were an addict or a bad person and they have an ND and they turn their life around, right? But for me, mine were all specifically geared to, realigning with my soul's true purpose because my work here in this lifetime is to work with the bereaved. And I would have never guessed that, from what from the life that I led, that this I would be doing this, especially going to Catholic school. So yeah, in the beginning, I struggled with it a little bit because of not so much my belief, but because of flack that I would get from other people. So I would do psychic fairs and I would have people come up to me and say, oh, you're doing the devil's work, and say mean things to me. So I would take it personally and I was like, oh my gosh. And I remember specifically. I did an event and this lady came up to me and I remember I was sick for like 2 days and it was almost like her energy came on me and she said, "Oh, you're doing the devil's work and this and that and the other thing." And I was so upset about it. And this was like a Friday night that I did the event. And then that Sunday I went to church and don't you know, and I sat there and I was just praying and I just said, please give me direction. I'm trying to figure this out. And don't you know, the sermon that day was, and I don't remember the verse, but there's a verse in there that says, God and the Holy Spirit bestowed certain gifts for people to use. And one is the gift of foresight, so intuition and it to be used for the betterment of others, and when I heard that, it was like a message clear to me, like, you're okay, you're doing it from a place of love and light, and so yeah, that made me feel a lot better, and then again seeing Janet, that she, she was a Catholic nun. It just kind of sealed everything for me. Like it gave me permission, that I needed for myself to do this work.
Yeah, I always think of the Holy Spirit, right? I always feel like I grew up Catholic too. And I remember it's like, how come we don't talk a little bit more about the Holy Spirit? It's just like kind of mentioned here and there, but our
Yeah,
focus is not really with the Holy Spirit, right?
right,
And I totally feel you on that about the perception that others have, because it is kind of like, I had to tell my family, and I was expecting it to be a lot harder when I told them that I was doing cards and that they were, I'm talking to them about mediumship, and they're like, "Oh my God, like what?"
yeah,
And this is somebody who I grew up Catholic, but then I kind of, phased out where I was like, I'm not
right,
talking about religion anymore, and I was kind
right.
of a little anti, religion, but then being brought back, they're like, "Wait, what?" so so I could totally understand, like the change that happens. But like you said, as long as you're coming from a place of love, a light and
Right.
love, then everything is good. I did want to ask you about mediumship, as far as like if you could tell the audience a little bit more about mediumship in general, and then also I would like if you could talk about what it's like to prepare for like a group event. How
Right.
is that different from, I would imagine, going from one on one to all of a sudden reading for a group.
Right.
I would love to know a little bit more about the preparation that
Yeah.
it takes for that.
Yeah, so mediumship is basically a two-way communication. It's a partnership with spirit, where the medium raises their vibration and spirit lowers their just a little bit, so we can meet in the middle and have that communication take place. And basically, it's a communication key. Everybody works differently. I'm clairvoyant, meaning I'm clear seeing. I'm clairaudient, meaning clear hearing. I'm clairsentient, meaning I'm clear feeling, and I'm clear cognizant, meaning clear knowing. So I use all four of those interchangeably during my readings. And basically it's symbols, signs, images, visions, hearing things, feeling things. It all comes in all different directions, and then just with my symbol key that I've worked with spirit to establish over the years, and that keeps growing. I know, okay, when they show me this, I need to say this. When you say this, I need to say this. So it's kind of like, they can't speak in these long, drawn out full sentences. So we have to kind of like charades, kind of, say something in quick and know what that means. It's not our job to analyze the information. We're just the go-between, pass it right on. So, it's interesting because when I first was in classes and then we'd stand in front of the group. So by default, I was standing in front of a group, not, intentionally. Oh my gosh, I would get so nervous. I would sweat. My voice would crack. I couldn't stand to be in front of people, believe it or not. And so what I had to do, um, I had to go and put myself out there and sing karaoke. That's how I overcame my fear of basically the fear of making a fool out of myself in front of people.
So I have to
So
ask real quick, were you a singer prior to karaoke? No. Okay.
a five from 1 to 10. I mean, I'm not so terrible, but no, you wouldn't. So, family cruises, there's karaoke in some local places, but I did it, to get myself like, okay, people are looking at me, because people are judging you. What people don't understand when you're a medium and you get in front of an audience, it's like being a performer. Like you get those jitters because really, it's your reputation, and you're only as good as your last, show, so to speak, or your last reading, right? And of course, we all have good days and bad days, but when you're in a group, you have to be on. So I learned to prepare myself, especially for the groups, is, make sure I get a good night's sleep the night before. Make sure I'm not doing any other readings that day. I clear my calendar, and I just make sure I do some self-care things, whether it's some kind of exercise or getting outside, fresh air, eating right. And I especially time it when I eat. If I'm doing an event at 7 o'clock, I try to have something like 5:30, even if it's not a full meal, a snack, because I don't want to have my energy like, low sugar or stuff like that. So I really try to time my eating. It's a very precise thing for me because I don't want to be too full. I don't want to be too hungry, so I have to kind of have snacks with me a lot of the times. And just make sure that I'm in a good frame of mind, and just kind of pamper myself that day to kind of gear up for the event. But the thing about the groups is, when you're doing a one-on-one, you're managing the spirit, you're connecting with that energy, and you're in a sense managing your client's energy, especially if they're still very far in grief. You have to keep the vibration high, especially if theirs is very low. You have to keep your energy high. But when you do a group, you have to manage the whole room energy, and that's where it can be tough, because um you have to sprinkle in, at least I do, it works for me. And we all know this spirit is so intelligent, and they do have a wicked sense of humor. So I like to, in my demonstrations, and I ask, hey, bring me that quirky aunt that said silly things or had, silly habits to make people laugh, or have, something strange. Grandma's talking about the raccoon that got stuck in the chimney and gave everybody fleas. Things like that, will come out like funny things because you have to have people laugh to bring that vibration up. So you just have to learn how to maneuver that and put that out again to spirit. It's all about that partnership. This is how I want it, bring me some of this so I can have some levity, to keep the vibration high. And then you learn to get your own flow as you go along.
Wow, that's really interesting. I didn't know that. Like to read the room, right, and to try to raise the vibration, especially with a
Yeah.
group. Funny enough, you're the second person who's mentioned karaoke, but different context. The person that
Uh,
was telling me about how they use karaoke to help them was with comedy, because he's a comedian.
mhm.
So he's like, I just had to just go in front and make a fool of myself singing.
Right.
And before you know it, he actually got better at singing. And then he was like, it just like made comedy so much easier. So I was like, oh wow, so I thought that was really interesting that he did that. And I was like, oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
And now you
I know
mentioned
people
that.
do, yeah, and I know people do like Toastmasters or things like speaking in public and things like that. Yeah, I think that gets you out in front of people to get you over that fear.
Yeah. So then
Yeah.
that's why I was like wondering, as far as like when you're working with a group, I guess like trying to keep that the vibrations high. You don't really want the room to go low.
Right.
Yeah. So I also wonder like when you have multiple spirits coming to talk to you, or loved ones,
Mhm.
I should say, they're coming to talk to you. How do you kind of distinguish like, okay, I'm talking to this person right now, or do you like somehow you're like saying, hey, I guess the rest of the group, I'm just going to focus on this person until I guess I open up the next, whoever basically is next can take over
Yeah.
next.
Well, when I do the groups, I try to keep the messages to get to as many people as I can. So I try to keep the messages like between 4 and 6 minutes, so I can get to as many people as I can. And sometimes they go over, sometimes some are even shorter, it depends. So, the spirit world controls that. I just tell them show up. give me the details. And whoever pushes to the front of the line, the energy. And again, it's all about the energy. Whose energy meshes best with mine, they're going to get to the front of the line. Who's got that strong personality, they're probably going to get to the front of the line. Or maybe there's somebody in the audience that really, really needs the message. I mean, everybody needs a message, but there are some situations that are very delicate. Spirit knows they're going to send the people that need to be there.
Can you describe like one of your best days as a medium? Any examples you would be able to share with us?
For me, the stuff that I like the best, there's a couple of evidence things that I like. Stuff that's like, well, for instance, I recently did a event for the Forever Family Foundation. And this was for parents specifically that have lost children. So, that's always pretty intense. And I brought this beautiful young girl and she showed me her long hair. She kept talking about her hair. So I mentioned that first. And then I went through and brought through, details about her personality, her passing, all the stuff. And she kept talking about her hair again. And she's like basically, you're not finished. You have to talk about the hair again. So I said, I know I mentioned the hair, but I have to say something else about the hair. There's something so specific that's a memory with her hair. And so I said to mom, I said, do you know what she's talking about? And so the mom reached into her pocketbook and pulled out a plastic bag with a long lock of her
Oh,
daughter's hair
wow.
that she had with her.
Wow.
So when you physically, see what you're talking about, and that's happened like I've had a mom where the son was saying he wants to talk about his shirt. He says, I have to talk about the t-shirt. And then the mother just holds it right up. She's got it on her lap and I can't see it, right? And she just goes like that. So I love when they do that. To me, that's very, very impactful, right? And the other thing that I like is what they see after they've passed, what they've done, what people have done in their loved one's memory, whether they planted a tree, whether there was, a big celebration of life at a school, maybe there was a special place where they scattered ashes and they showed me all these things to say, I was right there. I saw it, or I just saw my grandbaby being born, things like that. I love that. So those to me, I feel like are some of my, more memorable or best readings when I have stuff like that. And of course the names are always, impactful as well. Um, the only time that I can really remember is I was not giving a lot of hardcore evidence in the beginning, but I felt like I was, let me rephrase that. I was giving evidence, but the lady wasn't accepting it. Okay. And so I kept saying to her, but don't you understand this? And I'm like, so of course, in my mind, I know, right? I'm what I'm hearing because you got to trust, right? Spirit doesn't lie. And it kind of threw me a little bit. And so I said to her, why don't we reschedule? I said, I don't feel like we have a good connection. And are you okay with that? She said, sure. And then we rescheduled it. But about an hour later, she sent me an email and she said, first of all, she said, thank you for rescheduling. She said, second of all, I want to apologize. She said, because when I hung up the phone, I thought about the things that you said, and they were absolutely accurate. She says, she lost her job that morning before she got on the phone with me. She said,
Wow.
my head was just spinning and I wasn't focused and I just wanted to cry because I'm in a bad place with losing my job and all these things were going and so I'm sorry, she said, because I wasn't giving you, the right attention, focus on what you were saying. So, one, I felt bad for her situation, but then, I was like, okay, yeah, this makes sense to me because it is kind of frustrating when, 'cause then, and again, and this was a while ago, you walk away and you're like, my gosh, am I like losing it? Like, what's going on? How come I don't, is there something wrong with me? Did, is that a spirit not talking to me anymore? Like, you all these things go through your mind. But that was the situation. So,
It does happen to me with somebody just doesn't validate or is just not really saying anything, and you're like, I have no idea what what's going on here.
yeah,
Just kind of questions. Makes you question, like, well, I don't know if this was a good or
right.
a bad reading, or I don't know.
It's yeah, and it's really funny because even my husband like notices because every once in a while, if he happens to be walking by or he overhears me or something, just saying something, he'll say, or he's watching like videos of me, he'll say, "Oh yeah, I noticed how you say like if somebody says, oh, I said, well, do you understand that?" And they're like, "No, not really." And then I said, "That's okay, you will later. It'll sit with you. It's just not sitting now. Like, it's okay, fine, no problem. Yeah, it
Right.
makes sense later, like, with confidence." Well, when, of course, when I first started, I was like, "Oh my God, and I get all nervous and, but that's what happens when you first start out because you don't, you're still trying to navigate it. It can be overwhelming, but that's all part of the learning and growing pains of doing this work. But
Yeah.
yeah, now I'm just like, oh, no, yeah, it'll make sense.
Yeah, and I also want to point out to the audience too, like how legit Connie is. Okay, so I looked up the Forever Family Foundation,
Mhm.
and they've only certified 32 mediums from since 2005. So from 20 years,
Yes.
very few have been certified, and you're one of the certified mediums there. So that is something. I mean, I was just like, wow, I'm very impressed. And I just no, I was like, well, Connie's legit. She's a
Yeah,
legit medium for
it's
sure.
a tough process, and I was so thrilled, when I passed. I remember that I cried when I got the notice. I was like, "Oh my gosh," so
Yeah,
yeah.
what an accomplishment. So I wanted to ask you also, you mentioned when you had your NDEs, you were like, oh, this is a dream. Do you dream a lot too? Is that another thing that you, because if you mentioned this was a dream, I'm like thinking, okay, you might have also been dreaming a lot too. And I wonder, does spirit communicate with you through dreams if you have constant dreams or not?
Used to dream more when I was younger. And mostly they were flying dreams, which I understand now why I was having these certain type of dreams too. But not so much now. They don't really it's really odd. When I do dream, I'm always somebody else. I would say 99% of the time, every time I've dreamt a dream, I'm somebody else. I'm never me. I'm a little boy. I'm a man. I'm somebody else. It's very strange. I don't know if that happens to other people, but I'm never me. And I don't dream about people that I know. And when that does happen on occasion, that's when it means something. Because I was like, why did I have this strange dream about so and so? And then something, usually 2 or 3 weeks later, I'll hear something about that person and then it correlates. So it's odd. It's like when I dream, it's almost like my dreams could be like movies. It's like I see I'm somebody else. I'm watching this whole scene. There's a whole story going on. So I could be doing past lives in my dreams. I'm not sure, but I'm never me. So it's
Wow.
kind of interesting. Yeah.
Interesting that you talked about flying, because I had a dream interpreter, a previous guest, a last guest, and we were talking about flying, and he was like, well, he doesn't really do like general interpretations, but he was like, for specific dreams that he does, he did say like flying definitely is more about perspective, spiritual.
Right.
You're pretty much ascending. So
Right.
pretty
Growth
cool that
and
you were
right.
you were dreaming about
Yeah.
that early on.
Yeah.
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 I
Yeah.
heard there was a story I remember I would like you to share too, about a gentleman, and this kind of goes in, another two-parter about kind of distinguishing between a medium that, distinguishing what's a good and bad medium, right?
Right.
And you mentioned a story about a young man who was like, I'm so happy, or like, I'm glad you're talking to me, so
Right.
if you could share that story, I would love
Sure.
to share with the
Yeah.
audience.
And this was at another Forever Family Foundation grief retreat. And one of the first groups that I did, I brought through this young gentleman. He had passed by suicide, and I brought a lot of details about him. But one of the first things that I said is he's saying, his mom was there, is he said, I'm so happy to be talking to you. I'm glad to be talking to you. And I remember when I said it, it felt kind of, strange to say something like that. But, I just, again, we're not supposed to interpret. I just, put it out there. And spirit will say things to you, certain phrases, certain words, certain expressions that aren't necessarily your own. And, so I know that. So I was like, okay, but I just went on. Well, later, after the event, this lady came up to me and she had like tears in her eyes and she said, I just want to thank you. And she told me that she came to this event as her last resort because she had lost her son a couple of years ago. And she had seen, several psychics or mediums, and none of them were able to make a connection for her to her son. And she was told by a couple of these mediums or psychics, whoever she went to, it was because that he didn't want to talk to her, which is just atrocious. I mean, there's no words for that.
Right. Yeah.
Um, Obviously, either they were fraudulent, or even if they couldn't make a connection, you would never say that. It has something to do with their energy. It's just not a good match, whatever. But this poor woman was broken, thinking, gosh, my son is dead. He doesn't want to communicate with me. I mean, how horrible. So she just said that I just changed her life. And sometimes, everybody that comes to a medium is coming because they experience grief. But sometimes these people are they're hanging on by a thread. So you have to take this, profession very seriously, and know that, you could be the last person that this person talks to, before God forbid something terrible could happen, So you have to really gauge your client's mental state also and be very sensitive about that, and the words that you use and the care that you give when you're giving these readings, because you are, this is about healing, and and every message that comes from the other side is always love and light. There's never anything negative. And if anybody does receive a message that's negative in any way, then most likely that medium is not authentic.
Like you said earlier, spirit does not lie.
That's
So,
right.
yeah. Um, so you had the three NDEs. How has that impacted your view of what we come to Earth for? Like, what is our purpose here? Can you talk a little bit about what you experience and what your thoughts are on? Everybody has their own thoughts, so I like to
Yeah.
hear what everyone has to say. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm really curious because I believe in another interview you mentioned soul contracts, and
Mhm.
that, yep, and you mentioned in your book too the our soul journey. So yeah, if
Right.
you can give us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I've come to realize that the word actually life is an acronym for look inwards for enlightenment. Okay. So I believe we're here just to learn lessons. This is just a very brief stop on our journey. We are souls in a human body versus a human body with a soul. And yeah, we all have soul contracts. So before we come into these bodies that we have chosen, we know what our mission is supposed to be, what our true purpose is. But life happens and we live our lives as the human beings that we are. We get distracted, we go a different way, we have whatever things may kind of put us off our path. It could be upbringing, it could be finances, it could be mental health, it could be emotional health, it could be relationships, it could be jobs, whatever it is. Sometimes we get distracted, and our soul is always guiding us back. It's just that sometimes we miss the signs, like I did with my near-death experiences, right? I didn't know. Um, and sometimes we are prevented from realizing our soul's true purpose, either from something that's going on with us. Again, maybe we're experiencing some sort of addiction. or maybe some mental or physical impairment, or maybe we are in a relationship or around somebody that has those things that are kind of tying us down. Okay. So we all come into this world, what I call there's so my team on the other side has told me that there's five soul levels, which I call solitudes, which are our attitudes to our soul's true purpose. So there's the clear, the confused, the compromised, the committed, and the closed. So we come into this world clear, meaning we know clearly what our true purpose is, right? So for me, I was a natural born medium. I was seeing and hearing spirit at the age of 4 when I can really start communicating, right? And kind of, understanding. But then I forgot who I was. So I had to get woken up to get my path, back home. And we all go through these different levels, okay? I was confused for a while, thinking I should be a secretary. That was my life's purpose. Because why? Because my mom was a secretary. It's what I knew. It was comfortable. It was an easy choice, right? I kind of knew the outcome. It was a safe choice, right? But that's not who I was. Maybe that was my mom's choice, but it wasn't mine. But I didn't know any better, so I was confused for a while, right? So I kind of again show my story, but we all move through at least one or two of these solitudes. We might not experience all of them. For instance, the committed solitude are those people that have chosen to come here through their soul contracts and have a hard, difficult, and short life. Okay. These are your terrible sicknesses, children that are lost young, suicide, terrible accidents, things that happen random out of the blue. But they chose that experience. That is the hardest solitude for anyone to wrap their head around. And I don't really think that anyone really can truly accept that until you've actually transitioned and understand it, because it's just not something that we can say, why? Why would, why should this have happened? There's no reason for it. But there is a reason because people always ask me, well, what is my soul's purpose? What am I supposed to be doing here? Well, I can't tell you that. Nobody should tell you what your purpose is. That's for you to learn. But people think it's very complicated. So maybe they're thinking, I should be doing more. I should be a neuroscientist. I should be, an engineer. I should be, be a cardiologist. I don't know, something, right? Maybe it's just so simple that in your past lives, maybe you were a man, and maybe your soul's purpose in this lifetime was just simply to be a woman, or so you could be a mom. So just by coming here in a female form and having a baby, you fulfilled your soul's true purpose for this lifetime. Maybe your purpose was to be kind to animals. I mean, it's so simple. It's really when you look on the face of it, like what brings you joy? What makes you happy? Because if it's bringing you joy, that's your soul. Your soul is vibrating. Okay. So I think people try to complicate it and make it more than it is because whatever it is, maybe you were really a great person for several lifetimes and you wanted to know and feel the emotions to be a despicable human being so you could feel hate and know what that emotion feels like. It sounds bizarre, but this is just like a school here. And so we're all learning lessons of all these different emotions and feelings to say, okay, I want to experience that. It's almost like if you go like on a vacation or a cruise and you want to pick like those little, sub mini, tours or whatever that you can do, right? It's like, okay, I want to be a mean person. I want to be a mom. I want to be, a doctor. I want to go into the army. I want to see what it feels like to have an addiction. I want to see what it feels like to be in a car accident. It sounds crazy, but that's what it is. It's
I mean,
it's
it
it's
does sound crazy. I guess when we finally kind of like start to lift the veil and you kind of really
Right.
start to see Earth a little bit differently from a different perspective,
Right.
it does kind of make
It's a
sense,
school.
Yeah,
It's a school.
it
That's
is.
all it's a school.
Yeah. Because I kind of sometimes equate it to a simulation, right? Like where the best analogy is like a video game, sometimes, especially like the open world, which a lot of, people like playing those because you can do the side missions. You want to see
Right.
what this is like. Okay, go try it, and then see what
Right.
happens. And then yeah, you want to be the bad guy. Okay, well you're going to be the bad guy, or you decide to stick with your mission and complete the game as is.
Right.
So I kind of see that analogy now making a lot more sense. And then I
Right.
guess I just didn't really put into perspective of like, oh, if you had a previous life as a man, now you want to experience it as a woman, and just
Right.
giving birth, being a mother would be that
Right.
experience. So that does put another perspective into it. Maybe it's not as complicated, or that, maybe you're like, oh, but I want, I guess I always tell people, I'm like, we are creators. So it's not like we can't do the certain things. But if maybe your purpose was to be a mom, but you're like, I want to just make more money. It seems like that's
Right.
possible. It's very possible,
Yeah, maybe you were poor like in all of your lifetimes, so now you want to experience, being rich. That's
Right.
okay, right?
Yeah.
It's
What I'm seeing now is like the consciousness is raising. I think the social media, like YouTube has really opened the doors. I mean, that's how I got it
right.
because I was
Yes.
watching YouTube channels and then all of a sudden it's like, what's this NDEs? And then I,
Yeah.
made the connection that I was like, oh, I had an NDE when I was a child. It just wasn't aware of it. What's your, I guess, like words of wisdom that you would like to impart?
Well, how about don't knock it until you try it, number one, right?
Right.
So, be open-minded because it is mediumship is becoming more and more accepted and prevalent. And even, clinical, psychologists, psychiatrists, hypnotists, different people, even people that specialize in grief therapy are referring to mediums. Because we can make a connection to the other side, and it is healing. And it's not only just for grief, but it's also for trauma. Okay, so somebody that's had a bad relationship, and now that person's passed, how are they ever going to get an apology or an I'm sorry or understand, how could that be fixed when the person's passed? Well, it can be through a medium. The medium brings that person through and brings through evidence that this person is actually that person and brings through an apology. That is incredibly healing. It's not only grief, it's about trauma as well. And just keep an open mind, but really do your homework because you have to get with a reliable, credible medium. The Forever Family Foundation on their website has the list of certified mediums. Helping Parents Heal has certified mediums. These people have been tested and vetted. So I would definitely, use one of those resources, or if you have a friend or someone that has a reading, that says, yes, this person's credible. Just don't dial, somebody out of the blue that you don't have any background on, because unfortunately, the few pay the price for the many. There are a lot of fraudsters out there. And this is, sensitive work and it is about healing. So you do want to make sure that you're with somebody that's authentic. No, without a doubt, there is an afterlife because love, the bonds can never be broken.
Thank you again for being a guest on Spirit Said So. I really appreciate all the insights and stories that you were able to tell us today. And yeah, just thank you. And I'm sure we'll probably have more conversations in the future too on this show. So
That
again,
sounds good.
yeah,
Thank you,
thank you.
Kirby.
Thank you, Connie.
Take care.